The morning sun cast long shadows across my office as I pored over the latest blueprints of the Nexus. Fresh coffee mingled with the crisp smell of newly printed papers, a comforting blend that had become synonymous with progress. I took a sip from my mug, savoring the rich flavor as I examined the intricate details of our nearly completed sanctuary. A gentle knock at the door broke my concentration. "Come in," I called, setting down my coffee. Cassandra entered, her usual confident stride betraying a hint of excitement. "Sullivan, you need to see this," she said, her eyes gleaming. "The harmonization spell in the Central Plaza. It's working better than we ever imagined." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Show me." As we walked through the Nexus's corridors, the activity buzz surrounded us. Humans chatted animatedly with werewolves about the latest advancements in moon cycle adaptation spells. Young vampires and fays sat together in a sunny nook, sharing stories and laughter. The air hummed with a mix of languages and the subtle vibrations of various magical energies. Reaching the Central Plaza, I immediately felt a sense of peace and belonging that seemed to emanate from the very stones beneath our feet. The massive fountain at the center, its water infused with enchantments of unity and understanding, sparkled in the morning light. "It's remarkable," I murmured, watching a normally reclusive shadow demon engaged in friendly conversation with a light elf. "I've never seen them interact so naturally." Cassandra nodded, her satisfaction evident. "The spell is creating a field of empathy and openness. It's subtle but effective." As we observed the harmonious scene, Thaddeus approached, his robes swirling around him. "Sullivan, Cassandra." He greeted us, his weathered face creased in a rare smile. "I see you're admiring our handiwork." "It's more than we dared hope for," I admitted. "But we can't let our guard down. Peace like this is fragile." Thaddeus's expression grew serious. "Indeed, which is why I wanted to speak with you." There have been whispers. I felt a chill run down my spine despite the warm morning. "What kind of whispers?" "Nothing concrete," Thaddeus said, lowering his voice. "But there are factions outside the Nexus who are not pleased with our success. They see our unity as a threat." Cassandra tensed beside me. "Do we know who?" Thaddeus shook his head. "Not yet, but we should be prepared for." A commotion near the eastern entrance of the plaza cut off his words. A young vampire, barely more than a fledgling, was rushing towards us, panic etched on his pale face. "Mr. Sullivan," he called out, his voice cracking. "Come quickly. It's Elaric. He's gone." The peaceful atmosphere of the plaza shattered like glass. I exchanged glances with Cassandra and Thaddeus, seeing my shock mirrored in their eyes. "What do you mean gone?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm as curious onlookers began to gather. The young vampire, trembling now, swallowed hard before speaking. "His quarters. They're empty. There are signs of a struggle and a message." In blood, my mind raced with the implications. Elaric, the head of the Vampire Council, was one of our strongest allies in maintaining peace within the Nexus. His disappearance could unravel everything we'd worked for. "Cassandra, initiate lockdown protocols," I said, my voice low and urgent. "Thaddeus, gather our best trackers and meet me at Elaric's quarters. We need to contain this situation before word spreads." As Cassandra hurried off to secure the Nexus, I turned to address the growing crowd. "Everyone, please return to your residences or workplaces. We're implementing standard security procedures. There's no cause for alarm, but we ask for your cooperation." The crowd dispersed reluctantly, whispers already spreading like wildfire. I could feel the delicate balance we'd achieved, teetering on the edge of chaos. "Come on," I said to Thaddeus, already striding towards Elaric's quarters. "Every second counts." As we rushed through the corridors, my mind whirled with questions. Who would dare kidnap one of the most powerful vampires in the Nexus? How did they bypass our security? And most chillingly, what was the message left behind? The peace we'd worked so hard to build was under threat, and I had a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning of our troubles. The corridor leading to Elaric's quarters was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the Nexus's usual bustle. As we approached, the metallic scent of blood hit me, making my stomach churn. Thaddeus muttered a quick spell, his fingers tracing glowing sigils in the air. "Protection against dark magic," he explained grimly. "We don't know what we're walking into." I nodded, pushing open the door to Elaric's chambers. The scene inside made me pause, my breath catching in my throat. The usually immaculate room was in disarray, furniture overturned, ancient tomes scattered across the floor. But the far wall drew my attention, a chill running down my spine. Written in what could only be blood, a message glared at us. "The Nexus will fall. Unity is a lie. By the old gods," Thaddeus whispered, his face pale. I forced myself to approach the wall, examining the gruesome script. "Is this Elaric's blood?" I asked, dreading the answer. Thaddeus closed his eyes, his hands outstretched. After a moment, he shook his head. "No, it's mixed. Elaric's and something else. Something old and powerful." A loud crash from the hallway made us both jump. Cassandra burst in, her eyes wide. "Sullivan, we have a problem." Words getting out. "The vampire faction is in uproar, and the others are getting nervous. We need to act fast." I took a deep breath, centering myself. "All right, Thaddeus, start the magical trace. See if you can track where Elaric was taken. Cassandra, we need to call an emergency council meeting. All faction leaders, immediately." As Cassandra nodded and turned to leave, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A shadow seemed to deepen in the corner of the room, taking on an almost solid form. "Wait," I called out, moving towards the anomaly. "There's something." The shadow lunged, a tendril of darkness shooting towards my throat. I barely had time to react, throwing up a hasty shield spell. The shadow collided with the magical barrier, dissipating in dark sparks. Thaddeus was at my side in an instant, his staff glowing with power. "A shadow construct," he said, his voice tense. "Sophisticated magic. Whoever did this left it as a trap." Cassandra, her magic at the ready, scanned the room. "Are there more?" I shook my head, my heart pounding. "I don't think so, but this complicates things. Our kidnapper isn't just powerful, they're cunning." A somber silence fell over the room as the gravity of the situation sank in. The Nexus, our beacon of unity and peace, was under attack from within. And I had a sinking feeling that this was only the opening move in a much larger, more dangerous game. "We need to move quickly," I said, straightening up and smoothing my jacket. "Cassandra, get the council assembled. Thaddeus, begin the trace, but be careful. There might be more traps. I'll address the residents and try to calm the situation." As we moved to our tasks, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something crucial. The message on the wall seemed almost too obvious. A nagging doubt crept into my mind. What if the real threat was something we hadn't even considered yet? With a final glance at the ominous message, I stepped out to face the growing storm, my mind racing with possibilities and fears. The peace of the Nexus hung by a thread, and it was up to us to unravel this mystery before it was too late. The Grand Council Chamber, usually a place of measured debate and careful diplomacy, was now a cauldron of tension and barely contained panic. As I entered, the cacophony of voices hit me like a physical force. "Demand immediate action," roared Gideon, the werewolf alpha's massive fist slamming down on the ornate table. Across from him, Lilith, the representative of the Phi Courts, stood with arms crossed, her ethereal beauty marred by a scowl. "And risk further provocation, we must proceed with caution." At the far end, the empty seat where Elaric should have been seemed to loom larger than life. "Enough," I called out, my voice cutting through the chaos. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to me. I could feel the weight of their expectations and fears pressing down on me. "I understand your concerns," I began, meeting each leader's gaze. "The kidnapping of Elaric is a grave matter, one that threatens the very foundation of what we've built here. But turning on each other is exactly what our enemies want." Morn, the enigmatic leader of the Ghost Collective, floated forward. Her translucent form shimmered as she spoke, her voice echoing strangely. "Sullivan speaks wisely. We must unite now more than ever." I nodded gratefully to Morn before continuing. "We've already begun our investigation. Thaddeus is tracing the hidden magical signature, and we're reviewing all security measures. But I need something from each of you." The room tensed, waiting. "I need your trust," I said, my voice firm. "And I need your factions to remain calm. Any hint of internal strife will only weaken us further." Gideon growled low in his throat. "And what if it was one of us? The vampires have been growing restless lately. Perhaps this is an internal power play." Before the accusation could spark another argument, I held up my hand. "We will consider all possibilities, Gideon, but we will do so methodically and fairly. No accusations without proof." Just then, the chamber doors burst open. Cassandra rushed in, her face flushed with exertion. "Sullivan," she gasped, "we found something." All eyes turned to her as she approached, holding out a small, glowing crystal. This was hidden in Elaric's chambers, cloaked by powerful magic. "It's a message crystal." My heart raced as I took the crystal. These magical devices were rare and notoriously difficult to create. Whoever had left this was no amateur. "Should I activate it?" I asked, looking around the room. The faction leaders nodded, tension thick in the air. Taking a deep breath, I channeled a spark of magic into the crystal. It pulsed once or twice, and then a voice filled the chamber, a voice that sent chills down my spine. "Sullivan," it began, the tone smooth yet menacing. "I do hope this message finds you well. By now, you've discovered our little rearrangement in the Nexus. Consider this a warning. Your experiment in unity is an insult to the natural order. We gave you a chance to abandon this folly, but you persisted. Now, we will dismantle your precious Nexus, piece by piece." The voice paused, and I could almost hear the smirk in the following words. "Oh, and don't worry about dear Elaric. He's our honored guest. For now. How long he remains that way depends entirely on you. We'll be in touch." The crystal went dark, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. My mind raced. The voice was familiar, tugging at the edges of my memory. But Lilith spoke up before I could place it, her voice trembling slightly. "We gave you a chance." "Sullivan, what does that mean? Have you been keeping secrets from us?" I felt the weight of suspicion settling over the room. The unity we'd worked so hard to build was fracturing. "I've hidden nothing," I said firmly, meeting Lilith's accusing stare. But this message confirms what I feared. This isn't a random attack. It's organized and planned, and it's only the beginning. Gideon leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. So what do we do now? I straightened, looking around the room at the faces of those who had trusted me in the dream of the Nexus. We fight back. We find Elaric, uncover who's behind this, and show them that our unity is not a weakness. It's our greatest strength. As murmurs of agreement spread through the chamber, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that we were missing something crucial. The voice in the crystal and the carefully planned attack felt like moves in a more giant game. And I had the sinking suspicion that we had only begun to see the true scope of the threat we faced. Cassandra, I said, turning to my trusted advisor, I need you to dig deeper into our archives. Look for any mentions of groups opposed to supernatural unity. Thaddeus, double your efforts on the magical trace. And to all of you, I address the faction leaders. Keep your people calm but vigilant. Report anything unusual, no matter how small it might seem. As the meeting adjourned and the leaders filed out, each lost in their thoughts, I remained behind, staring at the now dormant crystal. The enemy had made their first move, leaving us reeling. But as the weight of leadership settled on my shoulders, I knew one thing for sure. This was a game we couldn't afford to lose. The Nexus and everything it stood for depended on our next move, and I was determined to make it count. As I left the Grand Council chamber, the air in the Nexus felt charged with an almost palpable tension. Whispers followed me down the corridors, and I could feel the weight of countless eyes upon me. Despite our best efforts to contain it, the news of Elaric's disappearance was spreading like wildfire. I went to the central monitoring room, where Cassandra was already hard at work, surrounded by floating screens of magical data. Her brow was furrowed in concentration as her fingers danced through the air, manipulating the information before her. Anything new? I asked, trying to keep the weariness out of my voice. Cassandra shook her head, frustration evident in her eyes. Nothing concrete, but Sullivan, the magical signature we found. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. It's as if whoever did this could bend the very fabric of our wards. A chill ran down my spine. Our wards were some of the most powerful, blending ancient magic and cutting-edge thaumaturgy. For someone to bypass them so quickly, could it be an inside job? I asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at me. Cassandra's eyes widened. You don't think. I don't know what to think. I cut her off, perhaps more sharply than I intended. But we can't rule anything out. Just then, an alarm blared through the room. One of the screens flashed red, showing a disturbance in the vampire quarter. Damn it, I muttered. It's starting. We rushed to the scene, shouting growing louder as we approached. A crowd had gathered in the vampire district's central square. At its center, I saw Victor, Elaric's second in command, face contorted in rage. How long will we stand idle while our leader is held captive? He roared, his voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. The other factions sit in their comfortable homes while we suffer. I say we take action now. The vampires gathered around him sang in agreement. I could see fear and anger in their eyes, a volatile mix that threatened to explode at any moment. I stepped forward, my voice magically amplified to carry over the noise. Victor, enough. This is not the way. The crowd parted, all eyes turning to me. Victor's gaze met mine, a challenge burning in his blood-red eyes. Sullivan, he sneered, come to placate us with more empty promises? I kept my voice level despite the anger bubbling inside me. I come to remind you of what Elaric stood for. Unity, cooperation, he would be ashamed to see his people turning to violence and accusations. A flicker of doubt passed over Victor's face, but it was quickly replaced by defiance. And what has this unity brought us? Our leader, taken from under your nose. Perhaps it's time we return to the old ways. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. I could feel the situation slipping away from me. Suddenly, a new voice rang out. And what would that accomplish besides proving our enemies right? Morwan glided forward, her ghostly form casting an eerie glow over the gathering. The vampires fell silent, many stepping back from the powerful spirit. Elaric believed in the Nexus. Morwan continued, her voice echoing strangely. He knew that together, we are stronger than we ever were apart. Would you dishonor his legacy with petty infighting? I watched the shame and uncertainty replace the anger on many faces. Sensing the mood shift, Victor opened his mouth to argue further, but I cut him off. Enough, Victor. You're grieving, we all are. But this is not the answer. Work with us, not against us. Help us find Elaric. For a moment, I thought he would refuse. But then, his shoulders sagged, the fight seeming to drain out of him. Fine, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But if we don't see results soon. He left the threat hanging in the air as he turned and stalked away, the crowd slowly dispersing in his wake. As the tension dissipated, I turned to Morwan. Thank you, I said softly. That could have turned ugly. The ghost's luminous eyes met mine, a hint of sadness in their depths. This is only the beginning, Sullivan. Fear is spreading through the Nexus like a disease. We must find Elaric quickly, or I fear this will be the least of our problems. I nodded grimly, knowing she was right. As we returned to the monitoring room, my mind raced with possibilities. Who could have taken Elaric? And more importantly, why? I was sure the pieces of the puzzle were there. But as I looked over the Nexus, watching the sun set on another day of uncertainty, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time to put them together. Little did I know, the actual test of the Nexus's unity was yet to come, and it would shake the very foundations of everything we had built. As night fell over the Nexus, I found myself in Thaddeus's workshop, a chaotic space filled with bubbling potions, arcane tomes, and magical instruments that hummed with barely contained power. The air was thick with the scent of herbs and the sharp tang of ozone, a testament to the complex spellwork being performed. Thaddeus hunched over a large, ornate mirror, its surface swirling with mist and flashes of light. His withered hands traced intricate patterns in the air, leaving faint trails of luminescence. Any progress? I asked, trying to keep the impatience from my voice. Thaddeus grunted, not taking his eyes off the mirror. It's difficult. The magical signature is unlike anything I've encountered before. It's as if it's actively resisting my attempts to trace it. I frowned, moving closer to peer into the mirror. For a moment, I thought I saw a flash of a dark, cavernous space, but it was gone in an instant. There, Thaddeus exclaimed, his voice tight and concentrated. I've got something. The mist in the mirror began to merge, forming hazy images. I leaned in, my heart racing. For a brief moment, I saw Elaric, his face contorted in pain, surrounded by shadowy figures. Then, just as quickly, the image dissolved. Damn it. Thaddeus slammed his fist on the table, causing several vials to rattle precariously. They're blocking me somehow, but I saw enough to know that Elaric is alive. For now. I touched his shoulder, feeling the tension in his muscles. You've done well, old friend. Can you tell anything about where he might be? Thaddeus shook his head, his expression grim. Not precisely, but the magical aura, It felt old, ancient, even, and there was something else, a sense of wrongness, as if the very fabric of reality was warped around that place. A chill ran down my spine. Could it be the void? Thaddeus's head snapped up, his eyes wide. The void? Sullivan, surely you don't think. The void was a mythical place, spoken of in whispers by the Nexus's oldest and most powerful beings. A realm between realms where the laws of magic and nature broke down. If Elaric had been taken there, our conversation was interrupted by a frantic knocking at the door. Cassandra burst in, her face pale. "Sullivan, we have a situation," she said, her voice tight and urgent. "There's been an attack in the Phi Quarter." My blood ran cold. What kind of attack? Some kind of magical explosion. Several Phi have been injured, and there's a message, like the one in Elaric's quarters. Without another word, we rushed to the scene. The usually serene Phi gardens were in chaos. The air was thick with shimmering, multicolored dust, the remnants of powerful Phi magic. In the center of the destruction, words burned in the air, composed of swirling darkness. The Nexus falls piece by piece. WHO will be next. Lilith, the Phi representative, approached us, her ethereal beauty marred by anger and fear. "This is what comes of your unity, Sullivan," she hissed. "Our people are being targeted because of your foolish dream." I held up my hands, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. "Lilith, please, we need to stand together now more than ever. This is exactly what they want to divide us." "And who exactly are they, Sullivan?" she demanded. "You speak of unity, but you keep secrets. How can we trust you?" The crowd murmured in agreement, their faces mixed with fear and suspicion. I could feel the situation slipping away, the fragile piece of the Nexus crumbling before my eyes. Suddenly, a deep, resonant voice cut through the chaos. "Enough." All eyes turned to see Gideon, the werewolf alpha, stride into the clearing. His massive form seemed to radiate authority. "Listen to yourselves," he growled, "bickering like pups while our enemies laugh. Sullivan is right. Divided, we fall. United, we stand a chance." Hush fell over the crowd. Lilith's eyes narrowed, but she remained silent. I nodded gratefully to Gideon before addressing the gathering. "I know you're scared. I am too. But I swear to you, we will find who's behind this. We will rescue Elaric and bring the perpetrators to justice. But I need your trust, and I need your help." As the crowd slowly dispersed, Cassandra pulled me aside. "Sullivan," she whispered, her voice tense. "There's something else." During the attack, our wards detected a surge of magical energy. It matches the signature from Elaric's kidnapping. My mind raced. They were here, in the Nexus. Cassandra nodded grimly. "It seems our enemy can come and go as they please. Our home is no longer safe." As the weight of her words sank in, I gazed out over the Nexus, where I had poured my heart and soul into creating. The dream of unity and peace now seemed more fragile than ever. But as I watched the various factions working together to tend to the wounded and repair the damage, a flicker of hope burned in my chest. We had built something remarkable here, something worth fighting for, and fight we would, whatever the cost. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. I coordinated with faction leaders to increase security, while Cassandra and Thaddeus worked tirelessly to strengthen our magical defenses. But as dawn broke over the Nexus, casting long shadows across the still damaged Phi Quarter, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something crucial. I found myself in my private study, surrounded by ancient tomes and magical artifacts. My eyes burned from lack of sleep, but I couldn't rest. Not while the Nexus was under threat. A soft knock at the door broke my concentration. "Enter," I called, not looking up from the text I was studying. To my surprise, Victor stepped into the room. The vampire's usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a look of grim determination. "Sullivan," he said, his voice low. "We need to talk." I gestured for him to sit, studying his face carefully. "What's on your mind, Victor?" He hesitated, seeming to struggle with his words. I may have information about Elaric's disappearance, information I should have shared earlier." My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. "Go on." Victor took a deep breath. "A few weeks ago, Elaric confided in me. He said he had discovered a secret about the Nexus that could change everything. He wouldn't tell me what it was, and he said it was too dangerous. But he was scared, Sullivan. I've never seen him like that before." I leaned forward, my mind whirling with possibilities. "Did he say anything else? Any clue about what he'd discovered?" Victor shook his head. "Not directly, but he mentioned something about the Nexus's true purpose. Said that its creation might not have been as generous as we believed." A chill ran down my spine. Victor's words had staggering implications. Could there be some hidden agenda behind the Nexus that I wasn't even aware of? An alarm blared through the room before I could press for more details. Cassandra's voice, magically amplified, echoed through the Nexus. "All faction leaders to the Grand Council chamber immediately. This is not a drill." Victor and I exchanged a look before rushing out. When we arrived at the chamber, the other leaders were already gathered, their faces a mix of fear and confusion. Cassandra stood at the center of the room, her usual composure shaken. "We've received a message," she said, trembling slightly. It was from Elaric's kidnappers. With a wave of her hand, she conjured a shimmering image. A hooded figure appeared, its features obscured by shadow. "Greetings, leaders of the Nexus," the figure spoke, its voice distorted. "Your time is running out. In 24 hours, we will release Elaric and the truth about the Nexus. Unless, of course, Sullivan is willing to make a trade." My blood ran cold as the figure continued. "Come to the Void Gate alone, Sullivan. Surrender yourself, and we'll return Elaric unharmed. Refuse, and not only will Elaric die, but we'll expose the lies at the heart of your precious sanctuary. The choice is yours." The image flickered and vanished, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Lilith was the first to speak, her voice sharp with accusation. "What lies, Sullivan? What aren't you telling us?" I held up my hands, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. "I don't know what they're talking about. Everything I've done has been for the good of the Nexus, for all of us." Gideon growled, his massive form tense. "And yet they seem to think you're hiding something big enough to blackmail you with." I could feel the trust I'd worked so hard to build crumbling around me. But before I could respond, Morwen floated forward, her ghostly form shimmering. "Whether Sullivan has secrets or not is irrelevant right now," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "We have a more pressing concern. The Void Gate has been sealed for centuries. If these kidnappers can access it." A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. The Void Gate was a mythical portal that was said to lead to realms beyond our understanding. Its power was legendary, and the danger posed if opened was unimaginable. "We can't let them open the gate," Thaddeus said, his voice grave. "The consequences could be catastrophic." All eyes turned to me, waiting for a decision. The weight of leadership had never felt heavier. "I'll go," I said finally. I'll meet them at the void gate. Protests erupted around the room, but I held a hand for silence. I don't have a choice, but I won't be going in blind. Cassandra, Thaddeus, I need you to research everything about the void gate. Victor, gather your best scouts. I want eyes on that location before I get there. As the leaders dispersed to carry out my orders, I couldn't shake the nagging doubt in my mind. What if there was some truth to the kidnappers' claims? What if there were aspects of the Nexus's creation that I didn't know about? As I prepared for what could be my final mission, I made a silent vow. Whatever the truth was, whatever secrets lay hidden, I would face them. For the Nexus, for unity, for the dream we had all fought so hard to build. Little did I know the revelations waiting at the void gate would shake the very foundations of everything I believed in. The journey to the void gate was somber. Despite my orders to go alone, Cassandra and Thaddeus insisted on accompanying me to the edge of the Nexus's boundaries. As we stood at the precipice, the air shimmered with the power of our protective wards. Cassandra gripped my arm, her eyes filled with worry. Sullivan, you don't have to do this. We can find another way. I shook my head, trying to muster a reassuring smile. We're out of time and options, Cassandra. I have to know the truth, for all our sakes. Thaddeus stepped forward, pressing a small, glowing crystal into my hand. A communication charm, he explained. It'll allow you to contact us when you need us. I nodded gratefully, pocketing the crystal. With a final look at my friends, I stepped through the barrier and into the unknown. The landscape beyond the Nexus was barren and twisted, starkly contrasting the vibrant life within our walls. As I approached the coordinates Victor's scouts had provided, the air grew heavy, charged with an energy that made my skin prickle. And then I saw it, the void gate. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was a massive arch of swirling darkness, its edges seeming to blur and shift as if they weren't fully part of our reality. Surrounding it were hooded figures, their forms wreathed in shadow. As I approached, one figure stepped forward. Sullivan, a familiar voice called out, chilling my spine. How good of you to join us. The figure lowered its hood, revealing a face I had hoped never to see again. Alexei, I breathed, shock coursing through me. Alexei, my former mentor, the man who taught me everything I knew about magic and leadership. The man I thought had died years ago. He smiled, but it didn't reach his cold eyes. Surprised to see me, old friend? I'm not surprised. You always had a talent for seeing only what you wanted. Where's Elaric? I demanded, pushing aside my shock and confusion. Alexei waved a hand dismissively. Safe, for now, but let's not waste time on trivial matters. We have more important things to discuss, like the true purpose of the Nexus. My heart raced. What are you talking about? The Nexus is a sanctuary, a place of unity for all magical beings. Alexei's laughter was bitter. Oh, Sullivan, it's still so naive. The Nexus was never about unity. It was about control. With a gesture, he conjured a shimmering image in the air. I recognized it as the original plans for the Nexus, but there were elements I had never seen before. The ley lines, the enchantments, even the very location, Alexei explained, his voice filled with admiration and disgust. All designed not just to protect, but to harness the power of every being within its walls. The Nexus is a battery, Sullivan, a source of unimaginable magical energy. I shook my head, denial rising in my throat. No, that's impossible. I would have known. Would you? Alexei challenged. Or were you too blinded by your idealism to see the truth? The elders used you, Sullivan. used your dream of unity to create the perfect magical prison. The world seemed to spin around me as the implications sank in. All those years of work, of believing in something greater than myself. Had it all been a lie? Why? I managed to ask. Why go to all this trouble? Alexei's eyes gleamed with a fiery light. For power, of course. With the energy harnessed by the Nexus, we could reshape reality itself. And now, with the Void Gate, we can extend our reach beyond this realm. He gestured towards the swirling darkness of the gate. Imagine it, Sullivan. Unlimited power, unlimited possibilities. Join us. Help us usher in a new age of magical dominance. For a moment, just a moment, I felt the temptation. The power Alexei spoke of was intoxicating. But then I thought of the faces of those in the Nexus, the trust they had placed in me, in the dream we had built together. No, I said, my voice growing stronger. Whatever the Nexus was meant to be, that's not what it is now. The unity, the community we've built, that's real. And I won't let you destroy it. Alexei's face hardened. I had hoped you would see reason, but I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. You always were stubborn. He raised his hand, dark energy crackling around his fingers. One last chance, Sullivan. Join us, or face the consequences. I stood my ground, drawing on every ounce of magical energy I possessed. I've made my choice, Alexei. Now let Elaric go and leave the Nexus in peace. Alexei's laugh was cold and mirthless. Peace? Oh, my dear Sullivan. We're long past that now. As the air around us crackled with building magical energy, I realized that the actual battle for the Nexus, and perhaps for reality itself, was only beginning. The air crackled with energy as Alexei and I faced each other, the void gate pulsing ominously behind him. His followers formed a circle around us, their shadowy forms blurring at the edges as if they were not fully part of this reality. You disappoint me, Sullivan, Alexei said, his voice laced with false regret. I had hoped you'd see the bigger picture. I stood my ground, channeling my magic into a protective shield around me. The only picture I see is of betrayal and corruption, Alexei. Where is Elaric? As if in answer to my question, a muffled shout came from behind the void gate. Two of Alexei's followers dragged forward a battered and weakened Elaric, his usually regal bearing diminished by captivity. Sullivan, Elaric gasped, his eyes wide with relief and fear. Don't listen to them. The Nexus. One of the hooded figures silenced him with a brutal backhand. My anger flared, and with it, my magic. Let him go, Alexei, I demanded, my voice low and dangerous. This is between you and me. Alexei's lips curled into a cruel smile. Oh, but it's much bigger than that, old friend. The Nexus, the void gate, the very fabric of reality, it's all connected. And with your cooperation or your demise, we will reshape it all. He raised his hands, dark energy swirling around them. One last time, Sullivan. Join us, or face oblivion. My response was a burst of pure magical energy that shot towards Alexei. He deflected it with a casual wave, sending it crashing into the barren ground nearby. So be it, he snarled, and the battle began earnestly. Spells flew back and forth, the air thick with magical energy. Alexei's power was immense, fueled by dark magics I had never encountered before. But I stood my ground, drawing strength from the thought of the Nexus and all those who depended on me. As we fought, the void gate began to pulse more violently, its swirling darkness expanding. I could feel reality itself starting to warp around us. Can't you feel it, Sullivan? Alexei shouted over the magical vortex. The barriers between worlds are weakening. Soon, we'll have access to power beyond your wildest dreams. I gritted my teeth, focusing all my energy on a counterspell. The only thing I feel is your madness, Alexei. This ends now. A familiar voice rang out just as I was about to launch another attack. Sullivan, catch. I turned to see Cassandra and Thaddeus, accompanied by a contingent of Nexus defenders, bursting onto the scene. Cassandra tossed something towards me, a glowing orb I recognized as one of the Nexus's foundational crystals. As I caught it, a surge of power coursed through me. The combined energy of all those in the Nexus flowed into me, strengthening my magic. Alexei's eyes widened in shock. Impossible. How did you? I didn't give him time to finish. With a roar of defiance, I channeled the Nexus's power into a massive spell, aiming not at Alexei but at the void gate itself. The resulting explosion was blinding. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a sound like reality tearing, the void gate collapsed, taking Alexei and his followers with it. As the dust settled, an eerie silence fell over the battlefield. Elaric, freed in the chaos, stumbled towards me. Sullivan, he said, his voice weak but filled with urgency. There's something you need to know about the Nexus. It's true that it was designed to harness power, but not for the reasons Alexei claimed. The Elders. They foresaw a great calamity. The Nexus was meant to be a safeguard, a last line of defense for our world. I helped Elaric stand, my mind reeling from the revelations. Why didn't you tell me this before? Elaric shook his head sadly. The knowledge was too dangerous, but now you must know the truth to protect the Nexus and all it stands for. As we returned to the Nexus, supported by Cassandra, Thaddeus, and the others, I knew our challenges were far from over. The threat of Alexei and the Void Gate might have been neutralized, but the revelations about the Nexus's true purpose would have far-reaching consequences. Looking at the faces of those around me, vampires, werewolves, fire, ghosts, and humans alike, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever the Nexus had been meant to be, what it had become was something truly special, a community united not by magical coercion, but by choice and shared purpose. As we approached the shimmering barriers of our home, I made a silent vow. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with external and internal challenges, but together we would face them. We would rebuild, grow, and protect not just the Nexus, but the world it was designed to safeguard. As we returned, the sun was rising over the Nexus, a new day dawning. With it, the next chapter in our ongoing story of unity, magic, and the never-ending fight for a better world.